begin with discussing the map elements in ArcGIS. Remember that the main elements that we're going to deal with are going to be frame or neatline, mapped area, insets if necessary, titles and subtitles, the legend, application of data source, scale, and orientation. Each of these elements should be on any map produced unless there is a compelling reason for them not to be present. Okay, now in this view we are looking at a template as produced through the ArcGIS interface. And remember that templates are preset maps that can be used to add data or to examine an area without having to construct it from scratch. It's important to notice in this that all of our elements are here. You'll notice, however, in this case that they use a neat line as opposed to a frame line, and in fact it's really a poor design from that standpoint because there's no reason for the neat line in this case. Again, what we have here is a frame line. You can see the frame line at the outermost edge. The neat line here separates our graticule along the outside portion. But again, neat line on the interior, frame line on the outside. Our mapped area being the southern United States. We don't have an inset in this case, although an inset could be applied that would suggest where in the United States we are. Title and subtitle. Title exists here. There is no subtitle. We have a legend. You notice the legend here, and this is a general reference map, so there are different types of data presented. The data source essentially is listed right here. That is the information about the data that is being presented in this case. Scale here is done using a visual scale or a scale bar. And then orientation, again in this map you'll notice that there is no north arrow, but that the graticule, and in fact you can see right here is a meridian. This is the 40th west meridian. In fact, you can see where north and south are here, and you'll notice this arcuate east-west parallel. Should note that suggests also a conic projection. Now, each of these elements can be added to a map in Arc fairly easily. And what I'm going to do is open up a regular map screen, if you will, and we're going to talk about how each of these things is added to the map. So let's switch our view here real quick. And now we see, again, a set of data, or three sets of data actually, and we're going to talk about a couple of aspects of them. And what we want to do is begin to look at our key elements to producing a map. So three data sets or feature classes on the left. And the first thing that we should note, again, when we kind of consider what is part of our map document, and that is to say, what do we need? Well, if we're going to be looking at the entire United States without any clipping or constraining of our data, we certainly don't need a neat line. But what we do want to do before we go any further is correct our projection properties. And you'll notice because of the north border of the United States being essentially a straight line, we know that it is not projected data, and we're going to correct that right away. Again, we're going to go into our data frames properties. We're going to select the coordinate system, and from the coordinate system we're not going to use geographic, but rather we're going to use projected options, and in this case continental, North American, and we're going to again use the USGS format. That is a contiguous Albers equal area conic. Once I apply that, what you will notice is that our boundary at the northern margin becomes again appropriately arcuate. And so now when we zoom in on Florida, which is going to be an area of interest today, we're going to see that the Florida map, we could also see this angle. The north-south line is no longer straight up and down, but it would be at an angle. All right, now I'm going to turn off the other two data sets here, so we're just looking at the Florida area here. And the first thing that we want to do is decide, since we are interested primarily in Florida, we are going to see Florida as a mapped area and consider what size paper we want to use or what size frame we want to use. And in ARC, it's often easiest to do this by selecting the page properties. And what I will do here is I'm going to go to the File, drop down, and you'll notice that one of the options is Page and Print Setup. I'm going to select the Page and Print Setup, and in this case I'm going to change it from necessarily portrait and constrained by the printer. I'm going to turn that option off, and in this case I'm going to set our width to 12 inches and our height to 10. I'm going to send this essentially to a kind of squarish looking piece of paper. The next thing I want to do is toggle, and again you'll notice at the bottom there is a toggle between a layout view and a data view. I'm going to click on the layout view, and now we see our page layout and our data frame with its handles. We call these little blue dots handles, and what I want to do is stretch this so that my handles essentially make our page and our map area coincident. And so we've got it there. Now we can right click on this and use the fit to margins. Again, right click on the mapped area, distribute and fit to margins, and that will bring the entire map all the way out to the edge. Now in this case that's a little bit much. We'd like a little bit of edge on this, but that is one way of doing it, is to move it to those. Now I'm going to take and bring it in just a little bit, and then using my down arrow keys I'm going to bring this down just a little bit so that we get a little bit of a border. We always want a little bit of a border on here. And there we go. So now we have our page set appropriately, and now I'm going to zoom in on our area of interest, which again is our Florida. So now we have our frame line, as we can see here. We don't have a neat line because, again, there's no real reason for a neat line here. We have plenty of white space that we're going to be able to work inside for the rest of our elements. So our mapped area is defined, and in fact I'm going to go a little bit bigger on this for the moment. We'll talk about that in terms of scale in just a moment. And then we have our inset. Now the next option here is I can insert pretty much all of the rest of our elements. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a title, and in this case we are going to say Florida, and we are also, what we're eventually going to be looking at is Florida's coastline. And click OK. And you'll notice that a fairly nondescript title appears. That title can be moved. The title, if you click on it, allows you to enter into a properties dialog box, and we're going to click on the change symbols, and you'll notice that, and we'll get to this again later, but this is an Arial, which is a sans serif font. It doesn't have those little serifs at the end, which is fine, but I'm going to bring up the font size to 24, and I'm going to make it bold. And again, the way that I did that was using the change symbol option under the title's properties. Apply, and you'll notice now that our title has changed. I'm going to move it in here. Remember, your title doesn't necessarily have to be centered, but it should be towards the top of the map. So we've got our title, we've got our frame line, we've got our mapped area, and we have an inset. Now, if in fact I wanted to add a neat line, we will see that in the next element. I'm going to go back and make this an alternative map in part 2 of this lecture. And until then, we'll see you then.